In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Good morning. Awake? How awake are you? Very awake? Extra awake? Little awake? So I'll see if you're awake or not. A little quiz. Which gospel we read from today? John, which chapter? Chapter 6. Very good. Somebody's ready. Which gospel we read from this morning at Matins? It's getting harder. John, which chapter? Huh? John chapter 8. 8. The end of chapter 8. Which gospel we read from yesterday in Vespers? John. It's not going to be very, it's not tricky. It's John chapter 6. So actually we read a little bit before today's gospel yesterday at Vespers, and a little bit in this gospel as well. You know what's common? Something is really common between the three gospels that we read. Well, first of all, yesterday's gospel, it was John chapter 6, and it was talking about how the people, after the miracle of feeding the 5,000 with the fish and the loaves of bread, how the people were seeking Christ to make him a king. Right? They said, we perceive that he's a prophet and we want to make him a king. And it says that Christ, he withdrew from them. So you're going to hear throughout the Gospels readings that we've read that Christ, maybe, I'm paraphrasing, concealing himself, he goes away from amongst the crowd. So yesterday when we read the Gospel, Vespers, Christ, when they perceived him to be a king, he withdrew from. And this morning, when we read the Gospel from John chapter 8, for Abraham, I am. And so they wanted to stone him. He was at the temple, and they wanted to stone him, and he withdrew himself from among them as well. And again, when we read the gospel today, then John tells us that Christ also, when the people, the same crowd that were fed came and they were looking for him, and when they did not find him, and when they finally found him, they said, how did you get here? And he tells them, you're after a food that perishes. You're laboring after a food that perishes. So again, Christ was concealing himself from them. And the church fathers talk about this a lot. Talk about why does God sometimes conceal himself from us? Or why do we sometimes feel that God is not answering my prayers? Or I'm searching for God and I can't find him. Is he really hiding from me, or there is something behind it? Does God want to give me a message, or is it just he's just concealing himself? No, there is a message. So for yesterday's gospel, he was telling them, you know what? When you want to make me king? St. John Chrysostom says, actually, he teaches us to despise worldly things and to despise any honor from men. By Christ concealing himself from them or withdrawing from them, he's actually teaching us something. And when they wanted to stone him, he concealed himself, or he withdrew to mitigate their anger, because they were very angry. You know who else Christ concealed himself from today? Who paid attention? Who did Christ conceal himself from today? Well, he showed him and then he concealed himself. St. Paul, right? And St. John Chrysostom says something really interesting. He says, for the roads, especially when they are lonely, give us opportunity for reflection, there being none to disturb us. When the roads are empty, when they are lonely, they give us a chance to reflect. Because St. Paul was laboring for something, right? He was going because he was defending the name of God, and he wanted to go and persecute. Who are these Christians that are coming and they're attacking my God? And They're calling themselves Christians. Let me go and persecute them. But Christ stopped them and he said, hey, you're laboring for the wrong thing. I have a better purpose for you. I have a purpose for you. And then he withdrew himself by closing his eyes, and he was on the road for 3 days. We read this. And so that by the time he reaches Damascus, he's now ready to be baptized. And it's as if God has induced this in him. And there is a beautiful book by Pope Shenouda, His Holiness Pope Shenouda. It's called Have You Seen the One I Love? And he discusses the songs, and he specifically, in one of the chapters, he talks about chapter 3, verse 1, by night on my bed I sought the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. He's saying, what does it mean that I did not find him? He says, His Holiness says there are periods of, or intervals of abandonment or forsaking. And the question that we got to ask ourselves today, do we feel this sometimes or not? And how do we react? Do we continue to pray? Because this is what His Holiness at least is telling us, is to continue praying at night, specifically to pray, to seek the Lord and to try to find out what's really going on. Why am I feeling this way? Lord, do you have a message for me? Do you want me to discover something about myself? Is there something that I'm doing wrong? And I want to be honest with you. I want to be very honest with you. Nowadays, we know what's right. You know, we know that we need to come to church. We know that we need to confess. But we're having a little bit of trouble understanding what is sinful. What is sinful? What is it that I'm doing that could be sinful? Sometimes I do things and I think it's just okay. I mislabel it. It's no longer labeled as sinful to me. And that's why God provides us the opportunities to come and to be on this road with Him, and to sometimes He conceal Himself from us so that I can examine myself and I understand what is sinful and how do I correct my ways, and that I should correct my ways. And that way we are laboring the right way. This is what Christ asks us to do today, is to labor the right way. Glory be to God forever and ever.